Okay, so when we left Granny and Ben, we were finishing up chapter 18, and that begins chapter 19, a small explosive device. The next morning, as Mom and Dad went through song after song to select some music for their son's upcoming dance competition, Ben sneaked out of the house and cycled to the hospital. When he finally found Granny's ward, he saw that there was a bespectacled doctor perched on her bed. Nevertheless, he raced over excitedly to see the old lady so he could share the plan with her. The doctor was holding Granny's hand and talking to her slowly and quietly. Just give us a moment alone, please, Ben, said Granny. The doctor and I are just talking about, lady things. Okay, said Ben. He sloped back to the swing door and leafed through a sickly looking copy of Take a Break. The doctor passed him and said, I'm sorry, before leaving the ward. Sorry, thought Ben. Why is he sorry? As he walked tentatively over to his granny's bed, Granny was dabbing her eyes with a tissue. And when she saw Ben approach, she stopped and shoved it back up the sleeve of her nightdress. Are you okay, Granny? He asked softly. Yes, I'm fine. I just have something in my eye. Then why did the doctor say I'm sorry to me? Granny looked flustered for a moment. Well, I imagine he was sorry that he wasted your time in coming here. There is absolutely nothing wrong with me. As it turns out, really? Yes, the doctor gave me the test results. I'm as fit as a butcher's dog. Ben hadn't heard that expression before, but he imagined it must mean very, very fit. That's brilliant news, Granny, exclaimed Ben. Now, I know you said no before. Is this what I think it is, Ben? Asked Granny. Ben nodded. I said no 100 times. Yes, but what, young man? I found a weakness in the Tower of London, and I've spent all week working on a plan of how we can steal the jewels. I think we can really do it. To his surprise, Granny looked intrigued. Pull the curtains and keep your voice down, hissed the old lady, flicking the switch on her hearing aid to full power. Ben quickly pulled the curtains around Granny's bed and then sat down next to her. So, at the stroke of midnight, we swim across the Thames in scuba diving gear and locate the ancient sewage pipe here, whispered Ben, showing her the detailed diagram in the back issues of Plumbing Weekly. We have to swim up a sewage pipe? At my age? Said Granny. Don't be daft, boy. Shh, keep your voice down, said Ben. Sorry, whispered Granny. And it's not daft, it's brilliant. The pipe is just wide enough. Look here. Granny lifted herself up from her pillows and moved closer to the page in Plumbing Weekly. She studied the diagram. It did indeed look wide enough. And here's a picture of Granny studying that diagram to make sure. Now, if we swim up the pipe, we can get inside the tower undetected, continued Ben. Everywhere else around the perimeter of the building, there are armed guards and security cameras and laser sensors. Take any other route in and we wouldn't stand a chance. Yes. But then how the blazes do we get into the jewel house where the jewels are kept? She whispered. The sewage pipe ends here at the privy. I beg your pardon? The privy. It's an old word for toilet. Oh yes, so it is. From the privy, it's a short run. I mean a short walk across the courtyard to Jewel House. At night, the door to the house is of course locked and double locked. Probably triple locked. Granny didn't seem that convinced. Well, Ben, we would just have to convince her. The door is solid still, so we'll drill out the locks to open it. But the crowns and the scepters and all that gubbins must surely be kept behind bulletproof glass, Ben, said Granny. Yes, but the glass isn't bomb-proof. We'll set off a small explosive device to shatter the glass. An explosive device, sputtered Granny. Where on earth are we going to get that from? I swiped a few chemicals from science class, replied Ben with a smirk. I am pretty sure I can create an explosion big enough to get through that glass. But the guards will hear the explosion, Ben. No, 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 I'm sorry. That's never going to work, exclaimed Granny as quietly as she could. Well, I thought of that, said Ben, momentarily delighted with his own ingenuity. You need to board a train to London earlier that day, posing as a sweet old lady. I am a sweet old lady, protested Granny. You know what I mean, continued Ben with a smile. From the station, you take the number 78 bus all the way to the Tower of London. Then you give the beef eater guards chocolate cake with something in it to make them sleep. Oh, I could use my special herbal sleeping tonic, said Granny. Ah, yes, fantastic, said Ben. So the guards eat the chocolate cake, and by nighttime they will be fast asleep. Chocolate cake, protested Granny. Surely the guards will prefer some of my delicious homemade cabbage cake. And here is Granny's recipe for cabbage cake. I doubt anyone would have added that to our cookbook. Doesn't seem too appeasing. Granny's recipe for cabbage cake. Take 6 large moldy cabbages, mash up the cabbages with your potato masher, make the cabbage mush into put the cabbage mush into a baking tray, bake it in the oven until your whole house smells of cabbage. Wait a month for the cake to stale, slice and serve, sick bucket optional. Yeah, no, that doesn't sound too good. Ben squirmed. He didn't want to upset Granny, but there was no way anyone would eat a piece of Granny's cabbage cake unless they were intimately related to her. And even then, they would probably spit it out when she wasn't looking. I think a chocolate cake from the supermarket would be better. Well, you seem to have thought of everything. I'm very impressed, you know. The idea of using the old pipe is genius. Ben flushed with pride. Thanks. But how did you know about it? They don't teach that stuff in school, do they? About sewage pipes and that? No, said Ben. It's just, I've always loved plumbing. I remember the old pipes being in my favorite magazine. He held up Plumbing Weekly. It's my dream to be a plumber one day. He looked down, expecting Granny to tell him off or mock him. Why are you looking at the ground? Asked Granny. Well, I know it's silly and boring to want to be a plumber. I know I should want to do something more interesting. Ben felt his face turn burning red. Granny put a hand on his chin and gently tilted his head up. Nothing you did could ever be silly or boring, Ben, she said. If you want to be a plumber and it's your dream, then no one can take that away from you. Do you understand? All you can do in this life is follow your dreams. Otherwise, you're just wasting your time. I guess. I should hope so, honestly. You say that plumbing is boring, but here you are planning to steal the crown jewels for goodness sake. And it's all down to plumbing. Ben smiled. Maybe Granny was right. But I have a question for you, Ben. Yes? How do we escape? A plan like this is no good if you are going to get caught red-handed, my lad. I know that, Granny. So I thought we should go out the way we came in, through the sewage pipe, and swim back across the Thames. It's only 50 meters wide, and I've got my 100-meter swimming badge. It would be a dawdle. Granny bit her lip. She obviously wasn't sure that any of this would be a dawdle, not least swimming across a fast-flowing river at night. Ben looked at her with hope in his eyes. Well, Granny, are you in? Are you still a gangster? She looked deep in thought for quite a while. Please, Ben pleaded. I've loved hearing about all your adventures, and I really want to go on a heist with you. And this would be the ultimate, stealing the crown jewels. You said yourself, it was every great thief's dream. Well, Granny, are you in? Granny looked at her grandson's glowing face. After a while, she murmured, yes. Ben leaped from his chair and hugged her. Brilliant! Granny lifted her weak arms and embraced him. It was the first time in years she had really hugged him. But I have one condition, said the old lady with a deadly serious look in her eyes. What? Whispered Ben. We put them back the next night. Chapter 20, Boom, Boom, Boom. Ben couldn't believe what Granny had just said. There was no way he would risk stealing the crown jewels only to put them back the very next night. But they are worth millions, billions even, he complained. I know, so we definitely get caught if we try to sell them, replied Granny. But, no buts, boy. We put them back the next night. Do you know how I evaded prison all these years? I never sold a thing. I just did it for the buzz. But you kept them, though, said Ben. Even if you didn't sell them, you've got all the jewels in your biscuit tin. Granny blinked. Yes, well, I was young and foolish then, she said. I have learned since then it is wrong to steal, and you need to understand that too. She gave him a fierce look. Ben squirmed. I do, of course I do. It's a brilliant plan you put together, Ben. Honestly, it is. But those jewels don't belong to us, do they? No, said Ben. No, they don't. He felt a tiny bit ashamed now that he'd been so horrified at the idea of giving back the jewels. And don't forget that every policeman in the county, maybe even the world, will be looking for the crown jewels. They'll have all Scotland Yard after us. If we were found with them, we'd be thrown into prison for the rest of our lives. That might not be long for me, but for you, it could be 70 or 80 years. You're right, said Ben. And the Queen seems like such a nice old dear. We are around the same age, actually. I would hate to upset her. Me too, murmured Ben. He had seen the Queen on the news loads of times, and she seemed like a nice old lady, smiling and waving at everyone from the back of her giant pram. Let's just do it for the thrill. Agreed? Agreed, said Ben. When can we do it? It would have to be Friday night when Mom and Dad take me to stay at yours. Did the doctor say when you'll be out of the hospital? Oh yes, he did. He said I could leave anytime. Fantastic. But we need to do it very soon. How about next Friday? Isn't that too soon? Not at all. Your plan seems very well thought out, Ben. Thank you, said Ben, beaming. It was the first time ever that he felt like he had made a grown-up proud of him. When I get out of here, I'll get on to pinching the equipment we need. Now run along, Ben, and I will see you next Friday night at the usual time. Ben pulled back the curtain. Mr. Parker, Granny's nosy neighbor, was standing right there. Startled, Ben took a couple of steps back toward the bed and quickly shoved Plumbing Weekly up the back of his jumper. What are you doing here? Asked Ben. Hoping to see me take a bed bath? No doubt, said Granny. Ben chuckled. Mr. Parker scrambled for words. No, Matron, hollered Granny. Wait, said Mr. Parker, panicking. I'm sure I heard one of you talking about the crown jewels. It was too late. The matron, who was an unusually tall lady with very big feet, clumped down the ward at speed. Yes, asked the matron. Is something the matter? This man was spying at me through the curtain, said Granny. Were you? Demanded matron, eyeballing Mr. Parker. Well, I heard that they were, whined Mr. Parker. Last week, he spied on my granny doing her naked yoga, offered Ben. Matron's face turned puce with horror. Get out of my ward at once, you filthy little swine, she screamed. Humiliated, Mr. Parker backed from the terrified matron and scuttled out of the ward. He passed at the swing door and yelled back to Granny and Ben. You haven't seen the last of me, before rushing out. Please let me know if that man comes back, said Matron, her face returning to a more normal shade. I will, replied Granny before Matron returned to her duties. He could have heard everything hissed Ben, maybe, replied Granny. But I think Matron scared him off for good. I hope so. Ben was very worried about this unfortunate development. Do you still want to go through with it? Asked the old lady. Ben had that feeling you have when you are on a roller coaster and is slowly making its way up the track. You want to go off and you want to stay on. Dread and delight all rolled into one. Yes, he said. Hooray, said Granny, giving Ben a big smile. Ben turned to leave, then turned around. I love you, Granny, he said. And I love you too, little Benny, said Granny with a wink. Ben wrenched. He had a gangster Granny now, and that was great. but he was going to have to teach her just to call him Ben. Ben ran along the corridor, his heart beating incredibly fast. Boom, boom, boom. He was electrified with excitement. This 11-year-old boy, who had never done anything notable in his life except once been sick on his friend's head on the big wheel at the local fun fair, was going to take part in the most daring robbery the world had ever known. He ran outside the hospital and began fumbling with the keys to unlock his bike from the railing. Then, looking up, he saw something unbelievable. It was his granny. That in itself was not unusual, but this was. Granny was abseiling down the side of the hospital. She had tied a number of bed sheets together and was lowering herself at speed down the side of the building. Ben couldn't believe his eyes. He knew his granny was a proper gangster, but this was off the scale. Granny, what on earth are you doing? Shouted Ben across the car park. The lift wasn't working, dear. See you next Friday. Don't be late, she shouted as she reached the ground, leaped on her mobility scooter, and whirred off. The word off home. And here's a picture of Granny scaling the side of the building. Granny is too much. Never had a week pass so slowly. Ben spent all week waiting for Friday to come. Every minute, every hour, every day seemed like an eternity. It was strange having to pretend he was just another ordinary boy when really he was one of the greatest criminal masterminds of all time. Finally, Friday evening came. There was a knock on Ben's bedroom door. Rat-tat-tat. Well, are you ready, son? Said Dad. Yeah, said Ben, trying to act as innocent as possible, which is actually quite hard when you are feeling extremely guilty. You don't need to pick me up too early in the morning tomorrow. Granny and I normally play Scrabble until quite late. You won't be playing Scrabble, son, said Dad. No? No, son. You won't be going to Granny's tonight at all. Oh, no, said Ben. Is she back in the hospital? No, she's not. Ben sighed with relief, then felt a prickle of anxiety. So why am I not going to her house? The plan was in place, and there was no time to lose. Because, said Dad, tonight it's the under 12 dancing competition. At last, your big moment to shine. Oh, and remember, Ben has been so busy planning that he did not have time to plan for his dance. That should be interesting.